Live Patriots Beat podcast. I am your host, Ryan Spagnoli. Joined with me, as always, my good friend, Alex Barth of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Alex, it's been a pleasure seeing you the last few days. I feel like I haven't.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's football's back is when I start seeing you down at
Oh,
Gillette,
yeah.
as cliche as that sounds. But a whole lot of the same. I think we can kind of take it from the start. Just more kind of BS going on, more non-football, non-productive things. Right. Like it continues to happen. And I guess the story, we saw it, kind of the scrum, like we didn't really see what had happened. But I guess McCaffrey got hit, didn't like it, felt it was kind of late, spiked the ball at Dietrich Wise. And next thing you know, Dietrich Wise is getting jumped and there's more guys piling in, and a woman actually got hurt. I don't know, severely, obviously.
I think they said she's okay.
Okay. Well, they went into the stands, right? So it was pretty hectic out there. But yeah, I guess normal football stuff, but like, come on. Like that's just what losing teams do. Unfortunately, like they bring that college type of, and I'm not trashing on Matt Rule or the Panthers, but I kind of am like that. That's just like, you go watch in Vegas next week. This won't happen. Maybe a little scrum with a few guys, like that's normal stuff, but like full 60 on 60 brawl. Like that's just college nonsense that they brought here.
I mean, there's guys who are instigating it, right? That's kind of what happens. And you look at Kenny Robinson, who, by the way, is retweeting his like hit stick highlight video right now after getting thrown out of practice for the second time in 2 days. That guy's a lunatic. I think in a couple. So it started. So just for the background here, one of the two fights yesterday, Kenny Robinson, who's a safety for the Panthers, and Christian Wilkerson got after it at practice. That was one of the fights. I believe it was the first fight. They both got thrown out of practice. Today, the first team period was kickoff. The Panthers were returning. The Patriots were kicking off, and Robinson hit Wilkerson, and by all accounts, the hit was clean. Multiple Patriots players said that, and they have a better view, obviously, down there than we do up on the hill. Now, the hit did knock Christian Wilkerson out, and he was out. He was out cold for at least 30 seconds.
And he was down a good 5.
No, yeah, he was down.
4 minutes.
I think the issue came in the way that Robinson and other Panthers players reacted to the hit. And Matthew Slater talking about when you have a guy lying there in a situation, you don't celebrate.
It's just respect.
It's one thing, right? It's one thing if the guy pops back up and you want to, I had a good hit. You don't do that when somebody's down. So that was, you had Matthew Slater and Cam McCord kind of push the Panthers sideline on it. That started, I don't know that there was actually a brawl that first. Okay. Like, I don't know that any punches were thrown, but you had everybody come together because when Matthew Slater,
Jabril.
So that wasn't there. So that first one, it just kind of, everybody came together. Again, when Matthew Slater starts, starting something, everybody's going to follow that guy. Me and you, I don't know about you. I'd follow Matthew Slater anyway.
Oh, yeah.
The guy's a tremendous leader.
To the gates of hell, Barth.
So, meanwhile, Wilkerson's still down. They start on the other end of the other field, 11 on 11s, and on the first snap, Dietrich Wise, I forget if it was a pass or a run. Christian McCaffrey's near the sideline. He gets knocked a little bit, steps out of bounds, and he's like a foot out of bounds, and Dietrich Wise hits him. Dietrich Wise, he hit him late. He did. It was not the worst thing anybody's ever done, but it was a little bit of, it was a little bit late. And
their star player,
right.
They're going to take offense to that.
Right. Panthers players took exception to that. One of them, I believe, was Taylor Moton, comes up to Wise, knocked Wise over into the stands, and that's when all hell broke loose. That's when Jabril Pepper started throwing haymakers. You saw guys going wild. Again, Wise was in there. I believe it was Marcus Jones had to be pulled out of there. That was the really nasty one. And this is all going on while Christian Wilkerson's still down on the field. And that's when that's to me when it was like, okay, this is now out of control. This is now gone beyond, because there's scraps in training camp. Like that happens when you have a full team brawl with fans getting involved while there's another player still lying down, potentially unconscious on the field. That's too far. Right. So, it kind of marred what I thought otherwise was a fun couple of days of practice. The update on Wilkerson, I know some people are asking. Let me just check Twitter real quick. I haven't checked since we started this show, and it doesn't look like there's any update. But the the latest update was actually Matthew Slater after practice told us that Wilkerson was being evaluated off site. I don't know if he meant that in the like was currently being evaluated or at the time that this was going on, like he had to be taken to be evaluated off site. You got to imagine it was a head injury, just given the circumstances. Again, it looked like he was out. He walked off the field like slowly with the trainers, but he did walk off the field. So it's not like I don't know that it was a lower body injury, but that's the latest on him. But yeah, it did absolutely get out of control today. Matt Rule didn't rule out that Kenny Robinson could be released. This is a guy who's been there. He's a bottom of the roster guy, but he's been there the last 2 years. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out and if it impacts the game on Friday at all, because you get in a fight in training camp, you get in a practice, you get in a fight in practice, you get thrown out. That's that. You might get fined internally, but it's not, going to really be anything of consequence beyond your wallet. You get in a fight in a preseason game, you're looking at a suspension. So I wonder if it impacts the usage on Friday.
And you can call me biased, right? But I think over the years, we haven't really seen this from the Patriots when they have joint practice, right? Like I said, there'll be scrums. It always happens 1-on-1, 2-on-2, right? Like guys pulling each other off. But we haven't seen this in back-to-back days. And if you just go off Bill Belichick's philosophy, these are very meaningful practices, right? And this nonsense going on is just time away from getting better, evaluating your team. It's just non-productive stuff. So I put a lot of this on Matt Rule because, if we know Bill Belichick, he probably pulled the team aside, not only yesterday, but this morning and said, none of that. Let's go out and have a good day, right? And ignore this. Let's not get involved. And it's just, like I said earlier in the show, it's that college type of mentality, right? Like I understand you Patriots are an inferior team. You're on their turf. I know it's practice, right? But they're not supposed to be a very good team. So what way to do it and set a tone early in the year than go up to Foxborough and knock them around? I get it. But like play between the lines. Like that stuff should have been nipped in the butt yesterday and it got out of hand again, right? Like Wise, right. Late hit on McCaffrey that deserves probably some shoving. That's their star player who's battled some injuries. But this stuff that just keeps happening is just time away from getting better. But aside from that, I think, getting into the overall practice, I
would even say you can use that as a jumping off point because you go back, right? The first play after the second fight, and after the second fight, they pulled the teams aside. Bill talked to the Patriots. Matt Rule talked to the Panthers, kind of gave them, gave them the talking to they needed. Matt comes back out and the offense comes back out and Matt drops a beautiful ball into Jonnu Smith and 11s for a touchdown. Then the next play hits Nelson Agholor in the back corner over 3 defenders for what was probably the play of the day. I mean, there is, I don't want to say there's value in it because I don't think for the teams there's value in those sort of fights, but I think you saw for us, it's a learning example to see how this team handles adversity. And
you're battle tested.
Right. Exactly. It's a little bit of that.
And overall, I thought the offense was much better today. Might have been their best day of camp, in my opinion, at least from my point of view. They got better than yesterday, much crisper. I thought Mac Jones was very good. They had their way with that Panthers defense. It started to kind of pick up. I know that like I said yesterday, the Panthers set the physicality and the tone early on. They were loud. They were yapping. And then towards the end of yesterday's practice, you saw the Patriots offense start to push back, start to show some life. And I thought right from the get-go today, right, starting after that fight, which I think was might have been the first or second play from in 11s, because Wilkerson got hit on a kickoff. They kind of attended to him while they started kind of towards the end of the field. Matt comes back and drops 2 dimes, a great route from Jonnu Smith and a great catch and throw from Mac Jones and Nelson Agholor. And they kind of picked up right where they left off yesterday. So I thought that was good to see. I thought the offense definitely had a much better day, maybe their best day of camp.
I thought they were better yesterday. I think it was 2 versions of the same thing. I just thought they were a little more consistent yesterday. I didn't love, the offensive line, right? You go back to that 2-minute drill at the end of practice, right? Mac didn't have a ton of time on that 2-minute drill to throw. He ends up having to throw the last pass away. So progress from where they were a week ago, certainly. I still think yesterday was their best day, but it's coming together.
Right. And, I liked what I saw from Nelson Agholor. I think that's a guy that we spent a lot of time on, saying where does he kind of fit in this depth chart? And he's starting to kind of make his presence known. I thought he was the best wide receiver on the field today. Jonnu Smith, you can see how they're using him in different, variations than maybe last year, maybe getting him a little bit more involved. So good to see. And I know Evan wrote a column on that for Patriots.com about, Aguilar and Jonnu Smith starting to kind of get their footing and carve out a role for themselves. I thought that was Aguilar's best practice. He was arguably the best receiver on the field today.
Yeah, he was really good today. And again, you're getting into that conversation now where it's, well, who's the odd man out? It looks like after Kendrick Bourne got tossed yesterday, he might have gotten, and maybe it was just
working with the second team early on, right?
Right, he kind of got the bump down where that had been Aguilar at times, working with the second team with Parker and Myers still with the first team. Now, I don't know, maybe that's just he got in the fight and they bumped him down as a slap on the wrist, or maybe Aguilar's legitimately passed him, whatever it was. I thought Nelson Aguilar made the most of that opportunity today.
Right, and the tight ends, obviously no Hunter Henry. Jonnu Smith thrived in that, more opportunity. I think with him, man, it's you see the talent in the skill, right? Like in the athleticism. I just think, last year there was a number of reasons. I don't think he was ever really comfortable in that system, but it seems to me, at least from afar, he's more comfortable this year. More, got a little bit more of a pep in his step per se. I thought he's had some nice days. They need him to get going, not only because of the money he's making, that's another argument, but he can be a real chess piece and a true, um, playmaker for them. I mean, we saw it in Tennessee. Will he ever live up to that contract? Maybe, maybe not. I don't think that's, like I said, that's a separate argument. But the Patriots offense wants to be much better and more consistent than they were last year. You need to see stuff that you saw today from Jonnu Smith, and it was good to see against a decent secondary and some good linebackers.
Yeah, I mean, I think with him, it's a usage thing, right? They tried to use him more as a traditional tight end last year, spell him with Hunter Henry, and I just don't think that's the player he is. I think he's more of that H-back, Kyle Juszczyk type, and you're starting to see him get some of those opportunities, right? Going in motion, coming more from inline, maybe out of the backfield. That should open his game up. I'm hoping, like we've seen them do things in camp that then don't carry over to the regular season. I'm hoping this isn't one of them.
Right, and sticking with pass catchers, Ty Montgomery made a sweet one-handed grab and one-on-ones. You saw his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. Obviously, with James White down, we talked about it yesterday. That's kind of their next man up, somebody that you can kind of plug into that role and, not necessarily miss a beat. There might be some growing pains because of the new, he's in a new place. But I think if you're looking for a guy that can make plays out of the backfield with the ball in his hands, it's Ty Montgomery, and he showed it again today. He's got strong hands. He's a mismatch for linebackers. He can kind of line him up wide. I mean, he spent time in the slot. I think a lot of times in Green Bay and a little bit remember he was like a wide receiver, then he was taking care, like he was the true, dual threat kind of receiver running back that I can remember, at least early on in Rodgers' days. So that'd be big for them if they can get some contribution from him.
Yeah. I think you see him as the back in those 2-minute situations, right? I think those 2-minute drills they've run at the end of practice the last 2 days, specifically these drills in joint practices. Those are the most telling reps and the most important reps in all of training camp. And that's where Mac won the job last year, was in those situations. I truly believe that. I think he was so good there that's what put things over the top. So to see Ty Montgomery as the passing down back in those situations in the backfield next to Mac Jones in the shotgun, like that tells me that's his job right now.
Right. And like I said, I thought another crisp day for the offense. Maybe we disagree that yesterday was better than today. I thought overall, like I said, last week when we started doing this, the sky was falling. Like you kind of wondered what you'd get today, if this would be even remotely, consistent, them even moving the ball. I think they're starting to get their footing on this new scheme, and guys are starting to get a little more comfortable. But I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on the offense. I think it was another day kind of dominated by the defense.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. We can agree with the defense, yeah.
Right. And again, DJ Moore, it's funny, Jaylen Mills kind of put the straps on him early on in the first 2 days, and then he made like 3 unbelievable plays in tight coverage. One of them was a beautiful throw from, I think it was Darnold over John Jones in the corner of the end zone. He made a toe tap in the back of the end zone, kind of near the goalpost. But other than that, I mean, their corners look much better. And we can kind of get into it. Obviously, right after we stopped recording yesterday, Malcolm Butler gets placed on IR. His season's over. His kind of comeback bid is over. Juwan Williams yesterday morning goes on IR. So we were kind of debating the last week, who's that odd man out, when theoretically they could end up keeping, 6 corners, 7 corners, depending on what happens at other positions. Maybe there isn't an odd man out. Do you still think it's Shaun Wade versus Miles Bryant, or there could be a very good chance that both of these guys make the team?
Yeah, no, I think there is more of a chance of it now. And, they're both playing well. Miles Bryant had a really good day today, I thought.
He did. Interception and early on, they got the crowd going. Yeah.
Yeah, Shaun Wade, it was okay. He got beat in that 2-minute, just didn't turn around to look for the football. A pass he probably should have broken up that would have ended the drive and given the win to the defense. Instead, I think it was Darnold was allowed to complete a pass to the end zone. I don't, and somebody mentioned in the chat, I don't rule out them adding another corner before week 1, like somebody off the roster, but you're starting to see that thing kind of crystallize. Now, as the picture becomes clear, do they have enough depth? I think that becomes part of the question. But
right.
Yeah, Butler, it's a shame. That would have been a really cool story if it had worked out. I still think he likely would have made the team in some manner. Maybe he gets cut and brought back right after guys are placed on IR or whatever. But yeah, no, I mean, Miles Bryant the last couple of days has been really good. That's kind of been my standout in the secondary. Like you said, the secondary wasn't as good today as they were yesterday. Jaylen Mills aside, Jaylen Mills was the best player of the joint practices. He was the best player on the field both days. And he had DJ Moore clamped during that 2-minute at the end of practice again today. But yeah, DJ Moore, he had a nice catch on Shaun Wade. He had that really good catch on Jonathan Jones, who continues to be a bit of a work in progress on the boundary. I'm not saying it won't work. I'm saying he's just a little bit away. That's kind of where they're at, though. Is there a little bit away? It still feels like they're waiting for either one of these guys, whether it's Wade or Jack Jones, to kind of step up and just hit that next level and start to really put something together, or maybe it's adding a piece from the outside to finish the puzzle.
I want to bring this question up. Wrong one. Sorry. About, if we're going to put Jonathan Jones outside, we need a veteran slot. I think that's arguably a question maybe to be had a few weeks ago. But speaking on, arguably the best player on the field, Jaylen Mills, I don't think Marcus Jones was too far behind him. He has been everything you've asked of. He made a unbelievably athletic play, kind of tipped the ball up and made a toe tap, kind of diving interception, got the crowd going. I think, and like we said last week, he didn't play a snap. He has completely taken over that starting slot. And like I said yesterday, I really can't remember a rookie corner or even receiver coming in and playing and putting, a stamp on that starting position this quickly. I mean, every time he's given an opportunity, he's made the most of it. And this looks like a day one impact player, could be their best rookie, really. I know it's early, but to this point, he's been their best player out of that class.
Well, I think if you specifically want a veteran slot, that's Miles Bryant. And I know people don't think of him as a veteran, but he's entering his third year in the system. Like, Miles Bryant's kind of that safety option in the slot. Miles Bryant's not going to play in the boundary. He's too small. Yeah, so I actually like their depth. And Shaun Wade can play in the slot too if needed. He can kind of play both. So even with John Jones moving to the outside, I'm still more worried about their depth on the boundary than in the slot.
And the bigger worry too, which you've been kind of harping on this the whole time when you do your roster projections, with Butler now out for the year and likely maybe an injury settlement, who knows what happens next. That's a really young group, like you've said, right? Their longest tenured guy is John Jones, who's a veteran, somebody that's been leaned on and has played in some meaningful games, but he's still learning how to play the boundary. Not that it's, he's a veteran. He's a good enough corner and an athlete to be able to make that transition, but there's still other, things that he needs to learn. And then the next tenured guy is Miles Bryant, who's in his third year, then Jaylen Mills, who's in his second year. You got two rookies that'll, Marcus Jones certainly seems like he's going to play a lot of snaps this year. Jack Jones could be a rotational guy, Shaun Wade, right? So that's, I guess, their biggest concern. Not only depth is, do they have enough veteran presence in that room to be able to get it done?
And that's why, again, I wouldn't be surprised if they add somebody else at some point. Like, between now and the start of the season, like a depth veteran who's maybe not going to play a ton, but will factor into the rotation and kind of
Jason McCourty type
in that room. Yeah, I saw somebody say Chris Harris Jr. Like, that's an interesting name. I think you see who
Yep.
gets cut elsewhere. Yeah, somebody like that.
So I think all in all, coming into the year, for me at least, my biggest concern was their cornerback depth. They didn't really address it in free agency. I know they signed Terrence Mitchell to, I think, a 1-year deal. Obviously, they took Marcus and Jack Jones in the 3rd and 4th round, but there was, so much talk about them going after a true one. And going into it, right, I thought, Butler's their 2, arguably their 1. Jaylen Mills, I thought, had a really good year last year considering the circumstances, and his first year kind of truly playing corner. Because if you remember his time in Philly, he played corner and didn't work out. He was viewed as a better safety. And then last year, Steph got injured and no one really knew. So he was kind of forced out there. So I think considering the circumstances, he had a really good year. Now you bring him in to be your cornerback 1. I think there was certainly red flags, but he's embraced that role, and I think they're much better off than they might have been, 3 months ago from a media and fan perspective.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So as far as the defense too, I thought their front 7 again it was too much to handle for Carolina. I think you saw a little bit more of a pushback. I don't think it was as good of a day like we saw yesterday with Barmore and Judon and Mac Wilson causing some havoc. But once again, I think they're winning in the trenches on that side of the ball. I don't know if anything stood out to you in terms of that. I know a lot of the 11s got taken away from some nonsense, and maybe they toned it back a little bit in terms of physicality wise after getting, kind of, yelled at by both coaches. But I thought another good day from their front 7.
Yeah, and I thought Anthony Jennings had another really good day. He's kind of the guy that stood out to me, that popped to me. So he continues to kind of make that push, and they need that guy in that Kyle Van Noy role. So to see him keep going, I think is a really good sign.
So, and I think this week was a good test for them to test their athleticism. We obviously saw it last week versus the Giants, but you're not going to face a tougher, more cover running back than Christian McCaffrey. Arguably, probably the best running back in the league when he's healthy, and somebody that, I'm a big running backs don't matter type of guy, but I'm certainly Christian McCaffrey matters because of what he can bring you from multiple angles. And I thought they passed that test. I thought it was a pretty good day from them. Pretty overall 2 days. They did a decent job on him. I mean, he's going to get his. That's one of those players that.
Right. The run defense as a whole is very good. And we talked about it yesterday. The question of, well, is Patriots offense actually this bad, or should the defense get some of the credit? I think that was answered pretty emphatically. Yes, the defense should get some of that credit. They looked really good. Right. So I think you have to walk away from these happy with the defense, especially the front 7.
Right. So, and like I said, I a little bit more of the same, similar kind of concept that they had yesterday. But overall, I thought coming away from these joint practices, it was a big opportunity for some of those bubble guys. And I think they really took a stamp. Like last week, Barth, we talked about Aguilar and how can he find a role. And he had a big day today. Shaun Wade was really good yesterday. Jaylen Mills looks to be that lockdown corner. Marcus Jones is man in the slot. Like, these guys have stepped up to their opportunity and made the most of it.
Yeah, I still have some questions. Like, I think DJ Moore's legit. Beyond him, the Panthers don't have a ton of NFL talent, especially with Robbie Anderson not on the field today. We needed, like, I think next week's going to be very telling. I'm not ready to say that the cornerback situation is taken care of yet. To me, that's still the biggest question on the team.
You're going up against arguably the best group in football with Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, who's been held out of camp. So I don't know if he'll be out there, but I think a much better team, much better quarterback.
Yeah,
more structure in their organization from top to bottom. Is crazy we're saying that about the Raiders right now, but I think McDaniels has done a pretty good job. They got a good team over there.
To me, the Panthers passed like the Patriots defensive backs passed the baseline test against the Panthers, but that's still, maybe right tackle now with win out, but I still think corner is the biggest question to me.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to kind of get into tomorrow at all. I know we had kind of planned to do a little preview. I think it's kind of a bow on top. Like, how much are we going to see these guys? I think it was a physical week for the most part, but
I mean, if we want to do that tomorrow, I still think we should do a show tomorrow. We haven't done a Q&A in a while. We could just take people's questions, just generally on training camp. It doesn't have to be on the joint practices. I'm sure people just want to throw like individual names at us. If you have other questions too, like that could work.
Yeah, I like that. So if you want to fire away in the
Yeah, just
chat, we'll spend
drop
kind of the
names in the
last
chat. I
10,
did
15
see.
minutes here answering.
Yeah, I did see one. Where'd it go? Or people getting them in yet? So yeah, just drop the names or other questions in the chat. Here's one. The two rookie defensive linemen, LeBron Ray, Sam Roberts.
Ray had a tip
A
pass
sack
yesterday that
today.
led to an
And
interception.
yeah, he had a tip pass yesterday that led to an interception. He had a sack. He looked really good. Haven't noticed Roberts a ton. He might just be a game guy, right? Just shows up in the game. But yeah, LeBron Ray had another good week.
And two, with both of those guys, right? You're going to see a lot more of them in the preseason. They're obviously going to have more of an opportunity to kind of showcase themselves. I think with this week, having the Panthers in town, having these joint practices, it's time for the ones, as you say, their starting unit to get those live bullets and more game action. So it's not uncommon that you don't hear a lot about these two, because I think their opportunity more comes in the preseason game after a week of guys like Judon and Godshaw and guys like that getting more reps than maybe they would be in a preseason game.
Right. Bailey Zappi today, he had a rough day. 3 of 9, 2 picks in the 2 minute. Just not his day. And he had been playing better too. He really had been playing better the last couple of days, but I think he hit a little bit of a wall today.
I think this is a good question too, sticking on the corners. And we've kind of addressed this overall the last few days. Should we expect Shaun Wade to make the roster with Butler now on the IR? I don't know if it's a lock yet, Barth, but it's certainly his chances got extremely better. I think that's a guy who's played really well. He's had a decent start to his camp, had a good preseason game, was much better yesterday than I think today. Like I said, I don't
today
think he's
not one of his better days. Yesterday was very good. Today was he got beat on that 2 minute. I mean, that stands out. Yeah, he's not a lock, but if they want more depth on the boundary, like I had said the other day, right? I thought it was him, Butler, and Bryant competing for the last spot. Well, Butler's now out. If they want help on the boundary, it's Wade. And I would add to that, Wade can play both spots. There's tremendous value there. So I think there's still a ton of reason for him to make the roster. It's going to come down to a numbers crunch. It may come down to what happens at other positions. They may like him, but they may have enough corners, right, without him, and they may say, well, it's him or Sam Roberts on the defensive line. It's him or maybe Christian Wilkerson or Lil Jordan Humphrey or Trey Nixon at receiver, right? It's going to come down to one of those at-large roster spots for him. So it's really tricky to project, but he's certainly in the running.
And here's another one. I just lost it, of course. It was
I can pull one up.
Yeah, it was regarding Yadni Kajust and Isaiah Wynn, making the roster. How did Kajust look? Or it's Kajust, right? You confirmed it today when I got there.
Yeah.
Right, here it is. It's from Ashley. How did Kajust look? Is Wynn in trouble of losing his job? This was something we touched on yesterday. Kajust had a really good day yesterday. Bill was not shy to give him more props about how it's his best training camp. He's looked really good in the opportunities he's been given. Wynn was not out there again. I don't, maybe Kajust didn't stand out as much as maybe he had in the last few days, but I wouldn't say he had he didn't stand out in a bad way or a good way, right? Like he's fully embraced that role, and I think solid. He's been solid.
You didn't really notice him, which is sort of what you want from an offensive lineman, right? So I said yesterday, or I don't remember if I said it on this show or I said it on my 90. Okay. If I said yesterday, all right, if Wynn misses the second joint practice, then, maybe we start talking about a potential position battle here. So I said that yesterday. I'm going to stick with it. I think it's game on against the Raiders, a team with a lot of good pass rushers, Max Crosby, Chandler Jones. It's going to get interesting here. And then one more on the offensive line too, to just pull this up. Arlington Hambright's a really interesting case. I don't think they have a ton of depth on the offensive line. Hambright's looked good at guard. And then when players got hurt at the end of that first preseason game, he was the guy they went to a tackle. So there's clearly some positional versatility there.
And he was working one-on-one with Belichick yesterday, right? Or Monday.
Right. He's a guy that I wonder, could they get him to the practice squad and then you just have him as a guy to elevate when they want to use him? I think he might fit that.
Yeah.
So they if they don't need to put him on the roster, right, they're not going to put him on the roster. They can put him on the practice squad and elevate him. But if he's here, he's going to play. I'll put it that way. Whether it's on the roster, on the practice squad, if he's here, he's going to play. And I think they would bring him back on the practice squad. It's a matter of if they do end up waiving him, if he doesn't make the team, and I had him just off the roster on my last roster projection, if they do end up waiving him, does he get to the practice squad? I think that's the question there. There were a couple others here. So yeah, this is one worth talking about. What's up with Kendrick Bourne running with the backups? I think that was a slap on the wrist for fighting yesterday.
I don't think his roster, he's not in jeopardy of like not making the team.
I think we would see stronger signs that they were interested in moving on from him if they were interested in moving on from him, right? He's a really good player. He's a great fit in their offense. He's a locker room guy. Mac loves him. I maybe he plays slightly less snaps, but I can't imagine he's like totally demoted. I really would be shocked if he didn't make the team. He didn't have a good camp last year. He's just not a camp guy. Like Trent Brown's the same way. People always talk about, Trent Brown doesn't look very good out there. And then, in 2018, we were talking about how miserable he looked in camp. And then he had a career year, and he was one of the best tackles in football that year. So I don't think Bourne's a camp guy. I'm really not that worried about where he's at right now.
And another one here, how big of a role does it seem for Thornton and Montgomery? I think Montgomery's your third down passing back. Thornton is still yet to be seen, right? We saw yesterday, Troy Brown had kind of said, pump the brakes, temper your expectations, don't fit him for a red jacket. But I think Montgomery's their third down back. If week 1 was tomorrow, I think that's kind of his role. And Thornton is still yet to be seen.
Yeah, Montgomery's going to have a big role. I truly believe that. Thornton, like you said, I think people are going to be a little disappointed, at least to start. That's not to say he can't grow into a bigger role later on, but I still think the feature guys are going to be Bourne, Aguilar, Myers, and Parker to start the season. I think Thornton's going to be a guy that they maybe they use situationally, they have packages for, maybe some scheme touch. I think he's a guy that at the earliest they wait to break out to midway through the year. Now, I'm the same guy who sat here last year and told you that they would redshirt Ramondre Stevenson because all of their history suggested they would. But even with Ramondre, he didn't get going until October, I think. So
he was a healthy scratch. It was him and JJ Taylor. He fumbled week 1. He wasn't active week 2. Week 3 he played. He wasn't active week 4. It's really when James White went down where he kind of got bolstered into that lineup.
Even then, because I remember it was like the Cowboys game was the first game he really played, and that was week 5 because that was after the Bucks game. And then he still was like in and out of the lineup a little bit after that. So yeah, I think Thornton's going to be the same way. I think he'll have a role this year. I just don't think it'll be huge to start. Let's go to this one because this is an interesting player. Harvey Longy hasn't been a ton, or was it Longy or Tavai that Belichick talked about on the SiriusXM interview?
I think it was Tavai.
That was Tavai. Okay, so Harvey Longy's special teams guy. He'll be in competition for the roster because of that. I wonder if they would preference a guy like DeMarcus Mitchell or Brendan Schooler, who's younger, has term, has some upside. Schooler low-key looked good at safety today, which is an interesting development. He lit 2 guys up twice. He had the boomstick going today. So they like Longy. In that sense, I think he has a shot to make the team. But, if I'm doing it right now, I don't know. I think it's hard to justify putting him on. A linebacker that I will talk about, Rayquan Mcmillan's had a very good camp, start to finish. We haven't talked about him as much recently. I think just because he's kind of been steady. He got out to a hot start, and he's sort of maintained that level. He's going to be the second middle linebacker next to Bentley. And then Mac Wilson's going to be their kind of passing situation guy, and he'll rotate in there. But McMillan's looked really good. The biggest question with him is, can he stay healthy? That's been an issue for him throughout his career going back to college. But if he stays healthy, he's going to be good. One quick comment, and then I don't know if you want to get one in. Yes, Troy Apke screams future Patriot. He just got cut by, I think, Washington, so we'll see if they feel like they need a special teamer. Troy Apke kind of fits that mold.
No, and real quick on McMillan before we wrap it up. Yeah. Like I said, I think even last year, you dated back, Belichick was really raving about him in his press conferences. I think he ended up getting hurt like a day or 2 after, and they lost him for the year. And that's someone, he was on a 1-year deal. While he was rehabbing, they extended him, I think, through the end of next year. So it just tells you what they value in him. Like you said, going to play next to Mac Wilson. Jawan Bentley, it's his room, as Gerard Mayo said. He's going to kind of be the man in the middle, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see McMillan more just because he can do a little bit of everything. He can play in the middle, but he can also cover. He's an athletic guy, and he's a linebacker with the no sleeves, no gloves. Who knows if it's a preseason thing, but he's got that old school kind of, BA type of mentality. Yeah. I love it.
Well, hang on. If we're going to go there, just back to the offensive line conversation real quick. Yadi Kajus is rocking a neck roll now. It's not as big as James Devlin's, but that's a guy that's coming for the starting job.
Yeah, your job's on notice when your backup who's had a really good camp rolls out to joint practices with a neck guard. So, um, real quick too, I've been seeing this on Twitter. Get this asked to me. We've seen it multiple times in here. How's Duggar been playing? I would like another guy that I don't think has stood out as much as you'd like, but I don't think he's been bad. Um, I mean, that's a very important piece of their defense. Whether he has the best camp in the world or the worst camp in the world, I don't think his role necessarily will change. And that's a guy who he's another guy like Bourne. Right? He doesn't really stand out much in camp, but that guy's a gamer.
I think what happened with Duggar is early in camp, he sort of struggled in the non-padded practices and people flipped out. And Kyle Duggar's game's all physicality. I mean, he's
Oh
just a
yeah.
guy that is going to show up more when the pads come on. Since the pads came on, he's looked good, but I think people are, still remembering back to the beginning of camp and Duggar didn't look good. No, he looks good. He had a pass breakup today. He's been flying around. They've been playing him more deep. I think people think of him mostly as a box safety in New England. He was really only a deep safety in college. He didn't play in the box until he got here. They've been playing him more deep, which is interesting given Devin McCourty's age. I think he has the athleticism to do it, and it opens things up for them to use Jabril Peppers and Adrian Phillips a little more. So it's going to be interesting to see how they use Kyle Duggar early this year.
And sticking on the defense too, real quick. Any news on McGrone? I think if there's been a disappointment, I think it's him, and I don't know if it's necessarily his fault. I think he's still working back. I mean, this is his first training camp. He was out last year with the knee injury. I've been a big Cam McGrone guy since college. I was fired up when they picked him. I thought they got a really good value pick, but I think it's just one of those guys that there's some guys ahead of him that have been much better. He's working with more special teams. I think he'll be on the roster. I don't think there's an issue there, but I think he's got some ground to make up in terms of where he fits, on their defense and in terms of their linebackers.
Well, I think the important or just with McGrone, and I would throw Ronnie Perkins in this too. I think second year guys that people were counting on, we really haven't seen anything from either of them. Like Ronnie Perkins getting in the middle of that fight today was the first time his name has really come up all camp, all summer. So those are two guys like McGrone I have on the outside right now. They can probably get him to the practice squad. He was so explosive at Michigan. Like that was the whole draw, right? He was this explosive, quick linebacker, and you're not seeing it. And it's not, a year removed from a torn ACL. It's not surprising necessarily to see that. It's not to say he's totally cooked, but yeah, he had a serious knee injury and he's moving a little bit different. I think you're seeing that. Perkins is an interesting one because he really hasn't done a ton, but he's a year removed from being a top 100 pick. Generally, you give those guys 2 or 3 years. I mean, look at Anthony Jennings right now, right? It was a top 100 pick and they were patient with him. And it looks like it's going to pay off. But I mean, there is precedent to move on from a guy like that. They moved on from Duke Dawson, who we saw get toasted time and time again with the Panthers this week.
He was a second rounder, let alone
he had a rough week. Yeah, another top 100. Well, no, I'm talking about Perkins now. It's a top 100 pick.
Perkins, yeah.
And Dawson was a top 100 pick. They moved on from after a year. So there is some precedent to that. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him.
So Boston Sports Minute, anything? The Red Sox had a big win last night. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, but they're not back. But
the Celtics schedule came out today. I don't really have a take on that. I think we're good on the Boston Sports Minute today.
Yeah, there's nothing else going on. But anyways, like I said, thanks for tuning in. I think it was a fun past 2 days, Alex. Good to get down there. Some real football. Obviously, they'll tie it on, kind of put a bow on this week, I guess.
Yeah.
Friday night in the preseason game. Who knows? I think we'll see the starters maybe for a drive or two. I think you'll definitely see more of them than you did Friday or last week.
Matt kind of suggested that he was going to play a little bit.
Right. I think it'd be the best thing for him. Just get in, get out, everybody stay healthy. And then, one more week of this. Really, it's pretty crazy, at least from, matching up with an opponent. Obviously, they'll leave for Vegas Sunday.
Yeah.
I don't think there'll be another practice that we'll be at until maybe 1 or 2 until week 1, until it's like, in season. I think that might have been it.
They'll have the joint practices in Vegas, and we'll do our best on those. Yeah, but we'll do our best on those to do a show, and we'll figure it out from there. But yeah, today was the last open to the public practice at Gillette this summer.
Right. Yeah, it's coming quickly. So we appreciate everybody kind of tuning in. The chat was really active today. we'll try to do
stuff.
that Q&A when it, there's not much to kind of break down other than the same thing that happened both days in a row. But we'll be back tomorrow, break down the preseason game, what we want to see, kind of some what to watch for, as well as, our thoughts this weekend on ultimately how that game ends up. But once again, Ryan Spagnoli, that's